Welcome to Bell Midnight. I'm your host, Joseph Michaels, joined by John Mack. This episode, we'll be discussing the 10 Commandments of the Antichrist, otherwise known as the Georgia Guidestones. We'll get right into it. All right, so what have you heard about the Georgia Guidestones?
I've heard they're, other than being in Georgia, I've heard that they've got some rather interesting things printed on them. A couple of things that I've seen printed on them are cause for alarm. Like a weird population control kind of shit on them. And I really think that someone should figure out exactly who put them there, because they probably should keep an eye on them.
Well, it just so happens we know exactly who put them there, but we'll get to that.
That's what I like to hear.
The whole story starts out in 1979. So to give you an idea of what was going on around then, the Cold War was taking place. There was fears of mutually assured destruction, nuclear war with Russia. The stones were built to survive an apocalypse, perhaps a nuclear war. All right, so the whole story starts in 1979 when a mysterious stranger approaches Joe Fendley. Joe Fendley is the president of the Elberton Granite Finishing Company in Elberton, Georgia. This stranger presents himself as Robert C. Christian, but he doesn't give any identification or any credentials to prove it. He even straight out tells Joe Fendley that his name is a pseudonym and he wants to keep his identity a secret. So
warning bells right there.
Immediate warning bells.
Yeah.
But the only thing Mr. Christian would say about himself was that he represented an unnamed group of loyal Americans seeking a new age of reason.
Okay.
He did tell Mr. Fendley that they were from outside of Georgia without any further elaboration. So, of course, Joe Fendley...
I wonder how far outside of Georgia.
Yeah, right? So, Joe Fendley's first instinct was that the guy was a crazy person. He took him a little seriously because he was dressed very nicely, he looked very well off, so he decided to at least hear this guy out. So Mr. Christian explained that he wanted to build a grand monument composed of 4 massive granite slabs, 16 feet 4 inches tall, 6 feet 6 inches wide, and 1 foot 7 inches thick. They would weigh 20 tons apiece, surrounding a center slab, all topped off with a giant capstone.
Was all of these measurements specifically given?
Yes, they were specifically given.
That is a very strange...
So these stones would weigh roughly 20 tons apiece, surrounding the center slab topped off with a giant capstone. The whole of it is estimated to weigh roughly 119 tons. There would also be various meticulous engravings upon these stone slabs, written in 8 of the world's major languages. So Fendley thought the man had to be joking. This guy's crazy. So he decided to ask, what would this colossal monument be for? And Christian goes on to explain that it would serve as a guide to future generations, as well as a compass, calendar, and a clock. It was meant to withstand catastrophes, natural disasters, and the unstoppable march of time, so that even if civilization were to be reduced to a few survivors, they would be able to find the stones and put to use the crucial information they contained. Christian was so serious about this, and he was so sincere and very eloquent about it all, that Joe Fendley started to feel, this guy might actually be serious. He's not pulling my leg. He means it. So this whole project that was being proposed was obviously very ambitious, extremely large, extremely complex. Undertaking this scope of project would be very expensive. So the Elberton Granite Finishing Company had never done anything like this before. Fendley decided to tell Christian that it would require stones larger than had ever been quarried before in the region, as well as an enormous amount of manpower, heavy equipment, expertise, and threw out an estimate much larger than he thought it would actually take to construct it. But here's the thing, Mr. Christian accepted this price without a question or haggling. He says, okay.
That's another warning sign. Tons of disposable money. Do we know what the estimate was?
I couldn't quite find the number, but it was easily in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. You normally wouldn't go right to the manufacturer to get a monument made. You would go to a dealer or a seller or something to get your monument. You wouldn't go directly to the quarry
The
and the
guy, yeah,
manufacturer.
not the guy who digs it up. You'd find somebody who specializes in making stuff, and then you'd have them do the legwork. That's the way it usually works.
Mm-hmm. So Joe Fenley pushed on to see who was it that actually wants this monument built. But of course, Mr. Christian would offer no information than what he had already given, merely mentioning that they had been planning the project for the last 20 years.
20 years for a stone monument?
He also refused to give any more information about himself either. He indeed told Friendly that if they were to accept the project, it was to remain strictly confidential, and that was a problem for Fenley, because he wanted to make sure he would actually get paid for this job. He decided to refer Mr. Christian to a banker he knew by the name of Wyatt Martin. That comes into play later.
Okay.
So Wyatt Martin, the banker, agreed to meet with Mr. Christian. So Mr. Christian meets with Wyatt Martin, the banker, to set up how Joe Fenley's company is actually going to get paid for this monument. When he goes and meets the banker kind of needs his actual identification.
Yeah, it's a large source of money. They can't just transfer funds like that without,
Exactly. Martin explained to him that without some sort of reassurance, who he was and whether he could even pay, there was nothing he could do for him. So Mr. Christian and Wyatt Martin came to a compromise. He agreed to tell the banker his real name under the condition of strict anonymity, and that once the project was done, all evidence of the transactions and his very existence were to be destroyed.
I don't think you're allowed to do that with large financial transactions. I think there's federal problems with that.
That's certainly true today.
Oh, that's true.
But I don't
Okay.
know about 1979.
Yeah.
So this seemed to do the trick for them. So the bizarre project went forward. They figured out he could actually pay for it. Mr. Christian presented them with a wooden scale model of the mysterious monument that was planned, as well as 10 pages of intricate specifications and instructions.
That's so weird.
Very specific.
Usually the contractor, the person doing the work, does the model as a pitch. It's so fucking weird. This whole thing is creepy.
So construction began, and it was carried out over the next 6 months in total secrecy on a 5-acre plot of land purchased specifically for this purpose. And of course, price seemed to be no object for Mr. Christian. And then finally, on March 22nd, 1980, the monuments were revealed to the public. There were 4 huge slabs surrounding the center one with the capstone, and then there was an actual text engraved upon it all. The text begins with, "Let these be guidestones to an age of reason," and then continues with its commandments for surviving the end of the world. They are written in English, Russian, Mandarin Chinese, Arabic, Classical Hebrew, Swahili, Hindi, and Spanish. There was also an explanatory stone tablet that explained that the 4 main granite slabs were aligned with the celestial poles, and that the center stone was drilled with an eye-level hole oriented with the North Star and a slit with the sun's solstice and equinoxes. The capstone also had a slit that was to be used as a celestial calendar and a clock. The explanatory tablet also identifies the languages used on the monument, its date of installation, as well as its dimensions and weight. Rather mysteriously, it also makes mention of a time capsule buried 6 feet directly under that spot, but the date on which it is to be opened has been left blank.
Maybe opened in a time of need or something was the implication for that?
There's one theory going around saying that there's no date for when it should be opened because it was actually never buried. Shortly after the Guidestones monument was completed, Christian would suddenly vanish into thin air without ever revealing his real identity to anyone. Only the banker Wyatt Martin knew. Mr. Christian and the shadowy group he worked for were never revealed.
Okay.
All that we know is Elberton Granite Finishing Company was paid in full. They did get their money.
Okay.
So, of course, given this mysterious monument pops up out of nowhere, there's been all kinds of speculation about who built it and why. So there's been speculation from the Illuminati to the New World Order, as well as other groups like the Freemasons, the Secret Society of Mystics, the Rosicrucians,
Oh.
a Coven of Witches, even Immortals, a Luciferian Secret Society, the Knights
my.
Templar,
It'd be funny if it was all of
UFOs.
the above.
Yes, they're all working together. So this site has been dubbed the American Stonehenge as well. Obviously, that's one of the more popular names for it.
Yeah, but real Stonehenge is actually less creepy than this.
Exactly. Some people have said it's a place for satanic rituals. It's been called the 10 Commandments of the Antichrist, that there's secret coded messages in it from a shadow government. It's a doomsday prediction, a landing site for UFOs. It just goes on and on and on. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm sure Bigfoot's been there.
One of the more plausible theories is it was all a bit of a publicity stunt by Elberton County to bring in more tourism.
I can see that. Hell, the price tag, though. Although I guess it's cheaper than building a stadium, right? The only problem with it being a publicity stunt is it's a significant investment, and it's only really going to pull a certain kind of person in.
Here's the weird thing about it. This was another specific instruction given to them by Mr. Christian, that it should stay open to the public, but it's not meant to be a tourist attraction, so he wouldn't let anyone set up gift shops. So no gift shops, no t-shirt stands, nothing like that. It had to remain clean and pristine. So the tourism theory is a bit out the window.
Yeah, it's kind of bad for tourism too. I mean, it's not bad for you know what I mean. It's not super effective. Like you'll get more people just having like a large indoor sporting goods store like that one sporting goods mall. It's not shoes or football, so what do they care?
Not shoes or football.
Yeah.
Moving on. There's a story that Mr. Christian sought out a professor at the University of Georgia when the stones were first being built to help write the Sanskrit and the ancient Greek on the capstones. So
he didn't know it himself then. He didn't pen it himself. He had to have someone help him.
That's right, but he was the originator of the commandments. But for some of the translations, it said that the United Nations helped provide some of the translations, as well as some professors who were experts in Sanskrit, ancient Greek. There's also a story that says some of the inscriptions are somewhat incorrect. There is no word for guide stones in Greek, so it reads something more along the lines of, let these be stones showing the way, roughly. The professor also mentioned that there is an error on the Sanskrit capstone. On the bottom of the stones, there is an EGA symbol stamped into the bottom of all of them. I've seen some people say they don't know what that means, and maybe it's some sort of a code. But that EGA is identical Elberton, Georgia Granite Association logo. And they stamp that logo onto anything that has gone through their QA inspection.
Okay.
So that's where that's from.
Okay. No mysticism involved in that one. That's just, Granite Inspector number 5.
Mm-hmm. So upon the stones being unveiled in 1980, R.C. Christian was not present. At least everyone believes he wasn't there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how would he know? How would you know?
But the thing is, when they were unveiled, there was a public address from R.C. Christian that was read to the crowd, saying that these stones were meant to guide mankind in the event of a nuclear war or Armageddon. So he specifically talks about nuclear war in his address.
Lovely.
Yeah, isn't it nice? So Mr. Christian, when he was there in 1979, just so you know, his age, they said he seemed to be about in his mid-70s.
Okay.
Moving back to the time capsules, there was an interview with the man who actually buried the time capsules. But here's the problem. He was extremely sketchy about whether or not he had actually buried them. He just wouldn't answer.
Yeah.
He said, Well, a lot of times there's different capsules in different places with different things in it. That could be the true identity to the group that Mr. Christian represents.
What the fuck does that even mean?
It's word salad. Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it's Jesus Christ.
Maybe they're there, maybe they're not, maybe there's more than one, maybe they're not buried where it says they're buried.
Maybe that's my laptop, maybe it isn't.
Yeah, maybe I left that $5 on the wing of the plane.
Yeah. That's my money. I left it there.
Yeah. Moving on to the astrological specifications for the Guidestones were so complex that Fenley had to get the services of an astronomer from the University of Georgia to help implement the design. So the 4 outer stones were oriented based on the limits of the sun's yearly migration, a hole which the North Star would be visible at all times, a slot that was to align with the position of the rising sun during the solstice and equinox, as we talked about. The principal component of their capstone was a 7/8 inch aperture through which a beam of sunlight could pass at exactly noon every day, shining on the center stone to indicate the day of the year. It sounds all sophisticated and fantastic.
Yeah.
But today, astronomers say that the astronomical features on the Guidestones are somewhat crude, a mere abacus compared to Stonehenge's computer.
That is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So we may just be dealing with a nut job.
Now, I forget exactly what year it was, but the stones were defaced by a group of vandals who spray painted all over them that said death to the New World Order and other things along those lines.
IRL trolling.
After that event, they cleaned the stones up and fixed them, and they installed security cameras.
Who paid for this? Also, who's paying taxes on that land?
Here we go. There's a story saying that the cameras aren't actually hooked up. They're just for show.
Okay.
But actually they are hooked up, and the feed doesn't go to a private security company or anything like that. It goes directly to the Elberton, Georgia Police Department. Why does it go directly to them? It's because after the stones were built and put in place and the site opened, Mr. Christian gave the deed to the land to Elberton, Georgia County. So Elberton actually owns that land now.
Okay. So that takes care of the tax problem. They're not going to tax themselves.
Exactly. So let's get into what do the stones actually say on them. The 10 Commandments of the Georgia Guidestones. The first one is the one that most people have a problem with. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature.
Excuse me?
Excuse you.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me see. 7,800,000,000 people estimated currently living on Earth. So to maintain humanity, hold on. So to maintain humanity in the manner described on the Guidestones is going to call for the deaths of 7 billion. It's at 500 million, right?
500 million.
Yeah, it's going to be 7,300,000,000 people will have to be killed.
And at the time of its unveiling, it would say roughly 95% of humanity would need to go away to achieve this commandment.
It's quite the commandment.
One of the reasons a lot of people say, well, Ted Turner must have been part of the Stones. The whole reason that rumor appeared was because in 1996, in the issue of Autobahn magazine, Turner had some off comment saying reducing the world's population by 95% would be ideal.
Oh, these people. It's always the same people, and they're always talking about massive death. They're a giant death cult. That's all they ever want to do is get rid of people.
Commandment number 2. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. You like that one? Guide reproduction wisely?
Yeah, I think China did something similar to that, didn't they?
So, I have this great article from Gary Ungurian, who goes into, He has some takes on the commandments, which are pretty fun.
Oh, I like fun takes.
Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. What he says about this is, we can discern that this commandment is related to abortion. In the last 40 years since Roe v. Wade was passed, it is estimated that almost 2 billion abortions have been performed worldwide. Over 60 million abortions have happened in the United States since 1973.
So wait, just to spitball here for a second. You've got how many worldwide did they say? 2 billion?
Yes, 2 billion abortions.
But only 60 million are in the United States. So the illustrious Miss Sanger, who is one of the founding members of Planned Parenthood, also had a very big problem with people of, let's say, other cultures. Her entire reason for starting it was culling certain populations. So this particular, let's call it a hot topic, is more widely utilized in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
That's very fascinating to me. I'm getting whispers of something I may have heard before. I'm just crazy. Please
You're just
continue.
crazy. You're just crazy.
Yeah, I'm just crazy.
You're reading too much into it. These commandments are very positive.
It's a positive.
There's
message.
a lot of people who say these are very positive messages. Let's move on to commandment number 3.
Okay, commandment number 3.
Unite humanity with a living new language. One language for all of humanity.
Oh, it just seems familiar. It's like the face of that person you see and you don't know where you saw him before. Please continue.
Mm-hmm. Next commandment. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason.
Okay, so no religion, no freedom of religion. One of the cornerstones that this country is founded on. Passion, basically, anything you're passionate about. Consider a world without passion or being ruled by reason, where every passionate feeling that you have. Now, I agree in a sense, in spirit with that in a lot of cases for something extremely important that affects a lot of people. You obviously can't go in feeling things all day. But to rule passion, it's exactly as it sounds. Rule it.
You sound like Gary.
To rule it, hey now. To rule passion, you would have to subjugate passion. To subjugate passion, you would have to subjugate the human animal.
Well, hey, look, Gary says to be an obedient globalist, one must put aside individual passions, temper their faith, and let traditions die. After all, the globalists dream of that kumbaya moment when everything is about the New World Order, not the individual, and of course, faith will be the one world religion.
It's probably, and I know what the god of that religion is, government.
Let's move on to our next commandment.
You got it, let's go.
Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Gary goes on to say, remember, the words fair and just will be defined by the one world government.
Yeah.
Or defined by whoever wrote them, because do we know who wrote them? Fair and just could mean a lot of different things depending on who wrote it.
It also is a direct call for a one world government because you're apparently have one court ruling over all nations. Now, all nations have separate needs. There's separate cultures. They have entirely different wants. I mean, just the difference between a urban and a rural life is night and day. Night and day. Let alone in India versus the United States or Canada versus Tibet.
But like I said, depends on who writes them. Did Gandhi write that? Or did Joseph Goebbels write that? Because it's nice, safe, flowery language, but they can mean radically different things depending on their definition of fair and just.
Of course.
Let's move on to our next commandment. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court.
Oh, fuck straight off.
Yep.
Sorry. That was a bit much.
Gary goes on, again, ultimately, the one world government, world court, will have the final say for all nations. They will no longer be autonomous.
So you hear that, people of the United States, what you need to do is give over your sovereignty to a world court so people that you have no say in electing can decide the fate of your entire judicial system and set precedent.
Yes.
People possibly from other countries like, China
Oh
or
no.
Russia?
But
Russian
hey,
interference.
there's only going to be 500 million people. Don't worry.
That's true. There's not really a lot of people that are gonna be able to gather in one place and voice a lot of dissent, so I'm sure everyone's gonna be
And
pretty happy.
and don't worry, they have all these other commandments to follow. Let's move
Oh,
on.
let's hear about those.
Avoid petty laws and useless officials. For this one, Gary goes on, I believe that this commandment is stating that anything that does not directly impact the New World Order is petty and not worth their time.
Yeah, that seems like shorthand for something. I mean, the notion is valid because if there's one thing that sucks, it's bureaucracy.
Hmm.
But when you've got a one world government that's deciding what's petty, well, then anything that's inconvenient can be petty.
Hmm. Let's move on to our next commandment. Balance personal rights with social duties. Boy, that's got a ring to it.
Yeah, I'm still. Where have I met this guy before? Hmm.
Yeah. Gary goes on to say, people must understand that under the one world government, individuals must desire to be good globalist citizens and not demand personal rights. Let's move on to our next commandment. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. What?
Wait, seeking harmony with the infinite?
With the infinite.
Is that a reference to a god?
Gary goes on. New age, new age, new age. Harmony with the infinite. As Christians, we clearly see that our love and devotion to Jesus Christ is in direct opposition to seeking harmony with the infinite.
Yeah, it does imply seek harmony with everything. Some things you can't be harmonious with. Actually, a cornerstone of, for the sciencey type out there, don't even want to take the religious angle. There's no such thing as harmony in nature. There's a sort of macro harmony, but on the micro level, everything is constantly fighting for survival and to one up each other. This
Mm.
notion that everything gets along is ridiculous. Harmony doesn't exist in nature. Nature is one big murder orgy. But whatever. Okay. So go against natural law. Got that commandment. What's the
Got it.
next?
Our 10th and final commandment. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. It repeats that. Well, that's all. Just leave room for nature.
Leave room for nature, but leave no room for human nature.
Gary
Okay.
goes on. Well, brethren, this certainly puts people in their place. Instead of being made in the image of God, which we know is true, he adds,
Mm.
we are cluttered and even a cancer upon the earth. The globalists would say Mother Earth. Ooh.
Ooh, Mother Earth. I have a question for you as it relates to this. I don't know if you're interested in answering it. um, your mother nature, your great spirit Gaia, and you are responsible for the development and the ascension of certain species that adhere to your natural law, the evolution of these species. One species in point that you have cultivated and developed in your bosom as Mother Gaia is the human species, the human race, Homo sapiens, and they have advanced so far. They have become an apex predator, a super apex predator, if you will. They have come to the point where they are able to have conversations. And in these conversations of your apex super predator, some of them say, we are a cancer. Your own greatest accomplishment self indicts itself as a failure. What a disgusting slap in the face of Mother Gaia, for she
Mm.
is mortal, and you forsake all of the hard work she has put into you, making you the best and putting the finest mind that exists in the solar system, possibly the galaxy, possibly even the whole universe. She cultivated that. And you turn around in your ego and arrogance and call those things a cancer and forsake her natural law. We got a real smooth brain writing this shit.
Who built the Georgia Guidestones?
An asshole.
Was it the Rosicrucian Order? A lot of
God.
people think that.
Wait, what's the guy's name who did this?
Robert C. Christian, or R.C. Christian.
Son of a bitch. They always have to be obvious, don't they?
And that's the thing about it, is because R.C. could mean Rose Cross Christian.
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of people are drawn to the Rosicrucian theory, because it seems like R.C. means Rose Cross of the Christian arm of the Rosicrucian Order.
The devil never does something without getting recognized for it. You know, the old saying that the devil, what he wants most is the attention. And the Rosicrucians are the same goddamn way. They never do anything without signing their name on it. Like John Hancock signing the Declaration of Independence. It's like John Hancock right across the front. Only thing you see.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Rosicrucians every time. Can't just do something subversive. When you do something subversive, they always got to sign it, just so they can get their little chuckle. Their egos are that fucking big every time.
But building weird monuments, that's not really their thing. Yeah, they have some parks and things where they got some little stones, but nothing really like this.
Yeah.
It's more like a Mason thing.
Yeah, kind of, but that RC name, I don't know, man.
If you really want to throw people off, just have a pseudonym that makes people think it's someone else.
That's true, too. Misdirection over confrontation.
And here's the thing. Were the Masons involved in building the stones?
Were they, dear narrator?
Were they? Well, some of the people working on the stones were indeed Masons.
Also possible given the line of work, though, however. So there's, you know.
Oh, yeah. Very possible given the line of work. There's a magazine called the Elberton Granite Association, or the Elberton Graniteer, published in, that was released in spring of 1980, where it talks about the Georgia Guidestones being built. Yeah, it's pretty good. They got some nice pictures. They got some details of them working on it, how hard it was. There's no telling information about R.C. Christian, but it goes on to say they did specifically choose pyramid blue granite.
Really?
Don't Masons like pyramids?
Yeah, they're kind of stupid about it, honestly, to like the detriment of other things. Like the Masons are showboaters, more so than the Rosicrucians.
And here's another thing about the Elberton Granite Finishing Company, is Argo Trucking was one of the big companies that really helped them build it and move the stones out there.
Okay.
They built a giant Egyptian spire for Argo Trucking Company.
What?
Yes. It's called the Argo Spire.
Argo Spire?
It was built in 1975.
Okay, I'm actually looking at the Argo Spire right now, and it's
giant Egyptian obelisk.
Yeah, it's super creepy and completely out of place. Like it throws the whole lawn off.
for a trucking company. Like it's in front of their warehouse with like pallets just all over the place, and there's this giant spire.
Yeah, they got the gas line hooked up right next door. Okay, so the trucking company is obviously heavily Mason influenced because no one else is gaudy enough to do something like that.
Right. So they are into Masons, a lot of the people that worked on the stones. But here's the problem. They're with a particular group of Masons called the Shriners, I believe.
I've heard that before.
And the Shriners, they're not even Masons. They're like a boys' club.
Oh, these are the Masons who show up and they have a couple drinks and they talk about some stupid stuff and they do the occasional hazing, but all of them really just want to get home in time to watch their precious football.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a boys' club where after work they go have some drinks, piss and moan about work probably, and then, you know, they do other stuff in the community like help with parades or whatever else.
Yeah.
But they're not really, you know, Mason, a secret group. They're just, it's a boys' club that just goes under the name the Shriner Masons.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So they probably weren't really secretly involved in some sort of secret project.
I don't think they're reliable enough to involve in anything secret. Guys like that never keep their mouth shut.
Oh, absolutely. They never keep their mouth shut, especially about something as juicy as that. Oh, if they knew anything, they'd spill it immediately.
Hey, they can't tell anybody, but they gotta tell Bob down the street because Bob really wants to hear about
They
this.
got it. They got to get drunk and tell Bob at the game.
Yeah.
So, what else is interesting about the Georgia Guidestones? Given that we know R.C. Christian, Rose Cross Christian,
Yeah.
Rosicrucian Order, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a guy named J. Weidner who's a Rosicrucian researcher, and he really looks into their stuff, and he's always into these secret societies and whatnot. He did an interview in 2010 because it was released in 2011,
Mhm.
where he said that the Rosicrucian Order was behind the Georgia Guidestones as exactly what R.C. Christian said, therefore, to guide humanity after an Armageddon. Because Jay Weidner said that the Rosicrucians knew about the Destroyer. They knew the
Oh.
Destroyer was coming.
Yeah, but doesn't it well, the quotes are about nuclear war, but that could be misdirection.
Well, either way, Jay Weidner getting this information from Rosicrucians is weird because Dr. Anthony Pratt's book, Physics of the Plasma Universe, didn't come out until 2014.
Okay.
So he had a 4-year head start on it, even though catastrophism science was around in the 50s from Colonel White's earlier books and works, and The Story of the Adam and Eve, that book by Chandler.
Yeah.
So it was known, but it ended up getting debunked by a CIA operative who proposed a theory that could be easily debunked.
Yeah, if you trust the CIA for anything, you're the world's biggest moron.
Yeah, he was a CIA op. That was really interesting because of given where they are and given what could happen, but they're not going to survive the destroyer. So,
Well, not in their current form. I'm sure they have brass that will.
but here's the next thing is when R.C. Christian built the stones, he intended other people to pick up the mantle and carry on this project by building an array of other monuments all around those stones serving as the centerpiece. Of course, that never happened, but that
No.
was his strategy.
There's a lot of weird things going on here, and there's of course always the possibility that this was just some guy who privately had a decent amount of money and knew how to throw up a good smoke screen. I mean, this is something if you decided to just mess with people, you know enough to do something like this, just for the laughs. But
Exactly.
I don't, I don't know. I mean, the Rosicrucians have they do they I have trouble recalling a lot of their history, but did they ever have the focus on, basically the same kind of focus on the sky and things like that? And was there a lot of sun worship going on with those guys?
I don't really know because getting
I
into
don't
the
know either.
Rosicrucian Order, you're when you're on the outside looking in at them, you get bombarded with a lot of word salad that doesn't mean anything. So
Yeah.
what can you do?
I mean, and I had the feeling that even though most of that word salad is intentional and stuff like that, I just get the feeling that were you within those walls, you would still be getting a fair amount of fucking word salad.
Oh yeah. So there was a show on History Channel a while back because we know how reliable of a source they are. But it was
Dude, the pyramids cannot have been made by anything but interdimensional aliens. It's absolutely Oh, sorry, I snorted. I shouldn't do that when we're recording.
don't say aliens, I swear. But yeah,
Aliens.
the show was called Decoded. I forget, it had a prefix, but
Yeah,
Decoded, that show, where they talked
yeah,
about the Georgia Guidestones. And they talked about, was it just like one guy with a lot of money? They said highly unlikely because you need to have one hell of an ego.
yeah.
And you're just kind of out a ton of money. Wealthy people aren't really known for just blowing money on stuff and then not getting recognition for it and trying to keep it a secret. Because
Yeah, it's like a
usually,
lottery winner kinda thing, not a
yeah,
wealthy person.
yeah, a lottery winner would do it, right?
Yeah.
But let's look at the Rosicrucian Order super quick. They have a book called The Mastery of Life, AMORC, and they talk about some interesting things in it. They talk about the mystical art of breathing technique experiments, awakening the psychic consciousness, human aura, mystical sounds. But what's interesting is the breathing stuff. What do they
Yeah.
mean by that? Are they talking about like Wim Hof kind of stuff?
Refresh my memory. What kind of stuff is that?
Wim Hof does the breathing techniques where he can just like hike Everest with like a
Oh,
pair
yeah,
of
yeah.
shorts.
I got you. Yeah, it's super creepy.
So are they talking about stuff like that? Now here's something else that's interesting. Later on, they go talking about the role of the brain, the power of thought, concentration, experiments to develop concentration, creative power, visualization.
So basically, a perception.
Here's another
And
thing.
yeah,
Mental creations, telepathy, mental projection. When they say mental creations, do they mean tulpas?
or an egregore. Yeah,
Because we know they're in esoteric stuff.
they love that shit. Yeah,
They have to know about tulpas.
I'm sure that's an old hat for them. What was that? The difference between Tulpa and egregore? Tulpa was egregore was more on mass scale, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't that?
Agregor is a big boy.
Yeah, it's a big boy on an astral plane, and when a bunch of people believe in something, he becomes a bigger boy, and he starts to be able to exert power. He was wasn't the egregore a Buddhist concept, or am I thinking of just the Theosophical Society?
I'm
I
not
can't
entirely
remember.
certain.
I'm not certain either. I have to look that up one of these days. I think it might have its roots in Buddhism, but
Here's one more interesting thing about Rosicrucians.
okay.
Is it was founded by Mr. Christian Rosencreuz. Christian Rosencreuz, R or
Yeah.
CR in this case, right? Some people say he existed, some people say he didn't really exist. That was just a title for the supreme leader.
Mm,
And that's another thing that draws people to the Rosicrucian theory is R.C. Christian. Even though he said it was a pseudonym, it may have actually been a title. He may have been the ruler of the Rosicrucian Order.
he's got an acceptable amount of age. He had a nice suit. I wonder how nice.
And money.
And money, yeah. Well, they have tons of money. I mean, speaking of which, have they tried to tank any economies lately like they used to do to cause world wars? Or have they been mostly silent?
I'm not
Oh,
a member, man. I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm just wondering if they're up to their old tricks trying to kill the UK with silver and, gold in other countries. I'm
Mm.
just curious. Oh, anyway, it would be a real shame if anybody looked them up and found out all about them and, just kind of read up on all the political turmoil they're responsible for and all the despicable, evil, nasty stuff they've done over the past, I don't know, a couple of centuries.
So you're not a fan, is what you're saying.
No, dude, they're cool. They're pretty chill, you know?
I'm a big fan.
Big fan. I wanna hang out. They seem like some drink some beer guys. They probably got some breathing exercises so you can drink more beers than the next guy. They probably got some tips for, where to invest your money, considering that they're usually the ones that are gonna tank the other markets, so you'll know where not to have your money.
hmm But now that language from those commandments sounds very familiar to you, right?
Mm,
Very
uh,
flowery, safe language that you've heard before.
yeah, it's very, very familiar.
That's very open to interpretation. Where'd that come from?
You know that Ted Turner thing? I just want to chime in here for a second. Remember you mentioned that Ted Turner had a quote
R-
about almost the same numbers. You said 95% or something like that. I
Right?
actually have that direct quote if you'd like to have that. If this recording would like to have that from Ted Turner, founder of CNN. The reported quote, a total population of 250 to 300 million people, comma, a 95% decline from present levels, comma, would be ideal. The reported quote from Ted Turner, founder of CNN.
At this point in
Mhm,
time, who built the
mhm.
stones? Was it the Masons? Was it the Rosicrucians? Was it the New World Order? Who do you think was behind it?
I'm gonna go with see, there's no way to know. It's always smoke screens and bullshit with these people. I don't know. I refuse to answer. Who do you think,
I could
Mr.
tell
Narrator?
you exactly who built it.
No shit.
I have his name.
Dish it out. I want to hear it.
So the language on the Ten Commandments, very flowery, very familiar,
Yeah.
political, open. It sounds a lot like the language of the 60s. Communism's not too bad. It's going to be fair and just. Now we're getting some clues.
Yep.
So there's a documentary, unfortunately, I didn't get to watch. I just had to get this all from an article because I wasn't going to pay whatever it wanted to watch the documentary when I could just read the article. But there's a documentary called Dark Clouds Over Elberton, the true story of the Georgia Guidestones.
Mhm.
These are documentary filmmakers who really, really wanted to know who was behind it.
Well, when someone wants something bad enough.
So what do?
Hmm.
They go see the banker, Wyatt Martin, who knows R.C. Christian's true identity.
I was wondering about that, like, if he had ever spilled. He had to have spilled to somebody, but
Well, the thing is, R.C. Christian didn't really just disappear. Mr. Christian and Wyatt Martin actually became pen pals and good friends who would write to each other all the time.
well, if you're a banker and somebody's dishing out a lot of money, you want to make sure that you always talk to them. I mean, that's just good business. So,
So here's another thing. It was a few years after the Georgia Guidestones were unveiled where R.C. Christian said he wanted to come out and say he was the guy who built them and he was the guy who wrote the commandments. But he never really got around to making it public because he wasn't that concerned, but he didn't really care if anyone figured out anymore. Mr. Christian wrote a book. In 1986, he wrote a book called Common Sense Renewed, similar to Thomas Paine's Common Sense. And in this book, he wrote, I am the originator of the Georgia Guidestones and the sole author of its inscriptions. I had assistance with other Americans, no mysterious purposes or motives. We seek common sense pathways to a peaceful world without bias to particular creeds or philosophies. Yet our message is considered controversial. I have remained anonymous to avoid contention and debate. Our guides must stand on their own merits. This documentary film crew will go back to the banker. They go back to Wyatt Martin. I forget exactly what year they went to him.
yeah.
But unfortunately, Wyatt Martin suffered a stroke earlier that year, I believe.
Yeah.
So he wasn't 100% there mentally.
Yeah.
And he was, of course, up in age. And he mentioned that he had writings and letters and still had some stuff from R.C. Christian because he was thinking about writing a book about his experiences with the Georgia Guidestones, but he never got around to it. So the documentary film crew says, well, can we look at the box? He goes, okay. So he shows him the box. And they go, well, can you open the box so we can see if there's actually stuff in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he opens it up. Can we look at some of these? We won't show them. And he kind of gets fooled into it, thinking that the cameras are off and that the camera guy's getting B-roll. He shows him some more documents where they get other aliases that R.C. Christian used.
Oh, I am fascinated now.
And they get his address.
Ooh, spicy.
Like I said, he wrote that book in 86. Well, there was another involvement with another alias of the publishing company.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite remember how all that went down, but with the address, they found out that he lived in Fort Dodge, Iowa. So with an address, they got his age, they can route through this publishing company a little bit, and they estimated that he was born somewhere around 1920 and probably died somewhere between 2004 and 2006.
Okay.
Well, with their investigations into him, they found that R.C. Christian was born in 1920, and he did die in 2005.
So dude was 85.
Christian talked about a lot of stuff with Martin that also helped reveal his identity. He said that the reason he wanted to build the stones in Georgia was because he was in the service, and he went through military training in Georgia. So he had a lot of fond memories of it. That's why he wanted them built there.
Okay.
He said that he had traveled the world. He might have served during World War II, and he hoped that these guidestones would last centuries. He handed the deed to the property over to the county because he figured that the county would be the longest lasting institution in the event of a nuclear war. Since the federal government, since the federal government would probably be destroyed or bankrupt at that time, then all your local little counties would be alive, right? Let's get to the name reveal. If you're using a pseudonym, you probably want to use something close to your real name. Maybe people have accidentally called you this. Robert C. Christian. Robert sounds like Herbert. First name is Herbert. Christian sounds like Kirsten. His name was Herbert Kirsten. Now, see, the thing is, why did he make the Georgia Guidestones? He got a lot of his ideas during the 60s and during the Cuban Missile Crisis, during the Cold War. He served in World War II. He saw a lot of bad stuff going on, and he feared for humanity. He really did fear Armageddon was going to come in nuclear war. And keep in mind, the reason he put the 500 million population requirement as the first commandment was because the famous book, The Population Bomb, was released in 1968.
Okay.
Which probably influenced him. One of the things he talked about that also helped lead to his identity is when he was talking with the banker Martin, he mentioned that he had experience working with concrete and he was interested in architecture. Well, it turns out Mr. Herbert Kirsten held a patent for a concrete facing device. He worked with concrete.
Okay.
And he also was interested in architecture because he had built some grandstands and things like that in his local town. So he was familiar with architecture. And R.C. Christian prided himself as a conservationalist. And on his tombstone, it says he was a doctor and conservationalist.
Dr. Herbert H. Kirsten, Fort Dodge. Dr. Herbert H. Kirsten, 85, passed away on Friday, June 10th, 2005, at his home. Funeral services will be held at 10 a.m. Tuesday, June 14th in the chapel of the Loffersweiler Sievers Funeral Home and 10:30 a.m. at Corpus Christi Church for a Mass of Christian burial. I see a pretty clear picture of the guy. Is there a particular reason why this is only being covered in German?
I don't know. Unfortunately, the documentary filmmakers tried to smear Kirsten as a racist and that the Stones were supposed to show off the pride of whatever.
Oh, God. Can we get off the racism thing for a while? Don't they talk about diversity on the Stones?
Exactly. They talk about diversity on a stone as well as it being in all these other languages like Swahili and Sanskrit and whatnot, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's obviously respect for those languages. Was the filmmaker problem glasses wearing hipster? Because it sounds like something
I have no clue. But here's the thing. All these claims aren't even second-hand claims. They're all third-hand claims from anonymous people that say, well, I didn't hear him say anything bad, but I know another guy who said that he agreed with a certain politician's policies, so therefore that other guy thinks he's racist, so I heard he was racist. I don't know.
Sources familiar with the president's way of thinking say.
And what it boils down to is someone misunderstood something that they just deemed as racist personally.
Yeah.
And they kept passing this on. Now, here's the thing. Christian mentioned he liked the ideas of a few politicians. One of those politicians happened to have like a racist history, but he later became a born-again Christian and denounced racism. And what policies were they specifically? Well, I don't know. Was it an economic policy? Was it something to do with vehicle registration? What policy was it? We don't know. Now, here's the thing. He probably wasn't a racist because Kirsten never mentioned anything about race to Wyatt Martin or Joe Fendley, or anyone he knew. He never mentioned anything about race in the Stones. Of all the writings on the Stones, nothing about race. And in his book that he penned under the name Robert Christian, in that entire book, there's nothing even touching race. So he's a really horrible racist.
He's terrible.
He's really lousy at it. Was it built by... So was he a member of the Rosicrucians? No. Did Wyatt Martin join a secret society after being friends with R.C. Christian or Herbert Kirsten? No, he didn't. He was never involved with any secret societies, him or Mr. Kirsten. It was just an old man concerned about the world, writing down the flowery hipster language of the 60s, the feel-good talk of the time, fueled by books like The Population Bomb, The Fear of Mutually Assured Destruction. That's all. Just an old man with some money and some backers, just trying to help.
Maybe. You know me, though. I'm a glasses half empty kind of guy. I look at people's actions and I don't have such a sunny outlook on them.
because now we hear that kind of language and we know that there is like a double speak from politicians, it's a double speak
Well,
from
yeah.
government. But at the time, 60s, 1979, 1980,
Yeah.
a lot of people just kind of bought that hook, line, and sinker. Oh, a fair and just government? That would be so great. Because they're not thinking, what do you mean by fair and just?
There's no such thing as fair and just and government existing in the same. But he's also considered that he's an older man at this point. He's putting up the Georgia Guidestones, and the man's in what was 79, and he died in 2010 at 85.
2005 he died.
He's already had enough life. He's been in the service. He's done all these things. He's had plenty of time to accumulate some wisdom. He's seen things play out. He's seen the same shit play out and go over again and again and again. He should be perfectly familiar with the nature of the human animal. He should
You
be
would
perfectly
think.
familiar. Yes. If
You
he's a
would think.
functioning human being, he should be able to at least have the wisdom to be familiar with this stuff. I mean, let's not look. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but let's not mince words here. I mean, a lot of the people who think purely based off their emotions and get bamboozled into the same crap over and over again. It's not the super. What's the word of mine?
You're so
The
cynical.
It's not cynical, man. It's just if someone's a billionaire and they're engaging in these sort of ideological policies, even when they cost them money, it's not because they're stupid. They don't have $1 billion by being an idiot. They have $1 billion because they're excessively smart. They're making an investment, counting on a return, just as they've always done their whole lives. I mean, yes, those people can be led into folly, as they generally are,
Right.
but usually it's at the higher level stuff. Like, just because someone makes stupid mistakes like that doesn't make them an idiot. And they're generally aware of what's going on around them. They wouldn't be this man, Robert Christian, or excuse me, what was his name?
Herbert Kirsten.
Herbert Kirsten is not going to be able to get through World War II. I mean, World War II probably scarred the guy. Understandable. He's seen the nature of man basically clawing their way through the mud. He has to have known people who were killed. He has to have seen how people work in self-interest. He's seen all these things. Then he comes out. He makes his money. He gets involved in private pursuits. He's seen the way the world works. He knows what's going to happen. It's the same thing has always happened. It is always going to happen. If you have an entity with that much power, especially after having seen World War II with the Nazis and the Japanese, he's got to know what's going to happen. I don't buy it.
Really?
I don't buy it. I do not buy his good intentions. Screw that guy. He has experience of World War II. He knows all about the rise of the Nazis. He knows all about good intentions. He's seen what the Japanese have done. And in his lifetime, the massacres in China. Let's not forget the legendary and unmatched death toll of Mao Zedong. I don't buy it. And if he is that stupid, to hell with him. Because you got to be a special brand of stupid to believe any of that nonsense.
It's just an old man who has lofty ideals, but like you said, he's just kind of buying stuff hook, line, and sinker, it seems like.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
If you think about back what he's seen, Cuban Missile Crisis, he was probably, if he served in World War II, he saw the bombs dropped in Japan. Maybe that just put the fear of God into him, to just absolute terror of nuclear war, especially with the arms race.
Well, I mean, if that put the fear of God into him, he surely had the intelligence to recognize that those bombs are being dropped by governments. So he thinks he's going to start a one more government to end all of this. Surely, if you're a thinking individual, you understand that a government entity of that sort of size and power is fundamentally dangerous, not to mention the population limit you're writing on stone. He's just seen population control, just saw it live in full Technicolor. He's just seen population control, and now he's writing it on stones. Tell me another one. You know what? I feel like this kind, gentle old man bullshit. I feel like it's exactly that. I'm starting to smell something that's being shoveled.
Hey, he's just an old guy who bought the texts, and he's into it. And he's just trying to help, man.
Okay. Hey,
he's just trying to help you out. He just wants what's best for you.
I don't need his fucking help.
I wouldn't take advice from him, but, at the same time, like, oh, okay, he's just an older guy, and he's terrified of World War, and okay, fair enough. But, keeping his identity a secret like that for a while.
Yeah, there's a but. There's a
But
but
it's,
coming.
the thing is, one of the clues that gave it away is it was all this the language you would hear in the 60s and stuff about things should be fair and just, and we should do this, and everything will be nice, and we gotta balance social duties and responsibility, all this kind of covert commie talk.
Yeah, propaganda.
Yeah, that's all it is. I mean, those 10 commandments of the Antichrist are essentially word salad commie talk.
Yeah, essentially. And here's the question. There's a couple things that don't mesh. We got the sun business going on. Oh, you got your guidestone. It's facing, the sun at noon. And you got all this weird side stuff going on too with these stones. It's not just like you just slapped down a couple of stones in there and said, "Hey, be nice to your neighbors, Hey,
Yeah.
maybe you shouldn't have so many kids because they're kind of, the river's looking a little bit polluted these days." No, there's some weird sun stuff going on. And that's the thing with these well-intentioned people. You get into the intentions and then you start to notice little peculiarities with their behavior. There's little weird cultish things going on in the background. Little defects in the thinking.
Mm.
So that's what I'm homing in on. I know that's petty, but when you start doing stuff like that, like I'm gonna hyper focus on that because normal people don't do that.
Well, I would build a giant tower with a bell on it.
I know you told me about this.
I would just build a giant tower in your neighborhood with a giant bell on it and just ring it at midnight every hour on the hour until 6 a.m. to keep everyone in the neighborhood awake and angry.
Yeah. What was the plan? And then as soon as you'd wall yourself in there so there was actually no entrance. And as soon as the police got there, to try to figure out what's going on, and they got approval from the local bureaus and stuff like that, actually tear through and try to get up to you, you'd be gone.
Just build another tower.
Yeah, then go somewhere, build another tower, and do it again. And they'll have to go through the bureaucracy and the board. They'll have to submit the papers and get the warrants and do all that. And you just go build another tower.
Yeah. Or I could build Georgia Guidestones, whatever.
Yeah,
but,
well,
Yeah, so how'd you like that story?
That was incredibly interesting. I think it's an incredibly interesting story. I think there is more to it that we'll never know.
I guess that's it for this episode. Oh, you're going to do cave stories next, the cave diving stuff, right?
Yeah, I want to talk about people getting stuck in caves and dying in caves, creepy caves underwater.
Ooh. That's it for this episode of Bell Midnight. We'll close it there. Next episode, we're going to talk John Mack's story about cave divers getting lost in caves, spelunking.
And dying. Cave dyers, more likely.
Yeah, mature audiences only.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Till next time.
Bye-bye.